Buddhism begins with the Buddha, maybe 2,400 years ago. And of course, the situation then was quite different than now. He didn't face the ecological crisis. And so we can't simply turn to the Buddhist teachings in order to find out what we should do in response to the situation that we're in now. Nonetheless, there are really important implications built in. In particular, I think the most important is the Bodhisattva path, or the Eco-Sattva path. The basic idea of the Bodhisattva path is always that one is concerned to become awakened, not just for oneself, but in order to help everyone. And therefore, bodhisattvas, including eco-sattvas today, they have a double practice. It's not simply that you work on your own awakening or enlightenment, but that you realize that that's insufficient, that you also have to embody that in terms of how you help other people. And given the kinds of challenges that we're facing today, which are very much institutional, it's not enough simply to work individually in order to address the situation, but that we have to find ways to work together with other people. Because the kinds of challenges we're facing today are institutionalized. Buddhism emphasizes what's sometimes called the three poisons or the three fires: greed, ill will, and delusion. And I think we need to recognize that they are very much at the heart of the problem we face today. I mean, when we ask, where do the problems come from? Why have we created the kind of ecological situation we're in now? I think it can be traced back to those, but not just on an individual level. Our economic system is a form of institutionalized greed. If greed means you never have enough. Corporations, for example, are never big enough, never profitable enough. Their market share is never big enough. Consumers never consume enough. There's a certain orientation built in here that I think fits in with the Buddhist critique of greed, always wanting more. And likewise, ill will, we see that functioning in terms of problems of militarism. If we look at the way the United States and some other countries have colonized and related to the rest of the world. And when we think about delusion, we can see too that that is also functioning on an institutional or corporate level. Today, I think we're all very familiar with fake news, but more than that, almost all the major media are corporations, which is to say that they're not primarily concerned about informing us or educating us regarding what's actually going on in the world now, but they're concerned to find ways, really, this is the most important thing, find ways to grab our eyeballs and sell them to the highest bidder, which is to say advertising. And again, encouraging the kind of consumerism that encourages us to exploit the earth, to treat the earth as a source of resources for us to use. And I think we can see that that's very much at the core, at the heart of the ecological crisis. One of the things that strikes me most about the ecological crisis is that how it really seems to be a larger version of the individual problem that Buddhism has always addressed. I mean, one way to understand the fundamental problem, according to traditional Buddhist teachings, is that ultimately at the root cause of my dukkha, suffering or dissatisfaction, is the delusion of a separate self. The delusion that there's a me inside that's separate from other people and the rest of the world outside. And we can understand Buddhist meditation practices as helping us forget ourselves, as Dogen says, or let go of ourselves and realize our non-duality, realize that we're not separate from other people. But isn't the ecological crisis exactly the same thing writ large? Except that the sense of self here, or the sense of separation, it's not just the individual, but it's the collective. It's our contemporary civilization, or even the whole human species, which feels separate from the rest of the earth. Just as on the individual level, when we feel the sense of separation, we tend to take advantage of other people because we feel that our well-being is separate from theirs. There's always the danger of ego sort of feeding itself in one way and another. And I think, again, that's exactly the same problem that we see collectively, that we have learned to exploit the earth, to treat the earth as an other, as a source of resources for us. And in the process, we have lost track of the fact that the earth is not just our home, it's our mother. The earth isn't some place that we just happen to live. It's the source. It's like we ourselves are one of the many, many ways in which the earth is taking form and manifesting. We need to realize that. So the parallel to me is quite striking. It's just a larger version of what Buddhism has always been talking about, overcoming the sense of separation, overcoming the sense of duality. And I think it's getting clearer and clearer that unless we find a way to do that collectively, I think it's pretty unlikely that we'll ever be able to solve the ecological crisis. Right? As long as we feel separate from the earth, that it's simply there for us to use, the problem will persist in one form or another. Yeah. Most of us spend most of our time, right, in sort of urban settings. And when we're in a city, basically, we're seeing the world in a particular kind of way, right? We see the world as a collection of separate things that we can use to do whatever we want, to gain whatever we want, to satisfy our desires. So we're always going somewhere, we're always using all of these things. And it perpetuates this way of understanding the world as simply something there for us to use to satisfy whatever we want to gain or wherever we want to go. But it's interesting when you go out into the natural world, maybe you go off by yourself, you're sitting under a tree, you're in a very different environment that discourages that kind of means ends, let's use this. And you know, the trees, the water, the brooks, the wildflowers of a meadow, such as we have up at the EcoDharma Center, they encourage a certain kind of way of a very different way of relating to one's surroundings, letting go of that utilitarian way of relating to the world and opening up to something that basically isn't going anywhere or doesn't need to achieve anything, doesn't need to get better. And I think that can be a really important practice for us today. And if you think about it too, it's like if the ecological crisis requires us, you know, is calling on us to love our mother, to cherish and take care of our mother, but it's pretty hard to do that unless you feel some relationship with it. And I think that's why it's, when possible and ever possible, to spend some time out in the natural world and start to feel that relationship.